Some breaking news here. You may know that the issue of whether Fani Willis prosecuting the case against Donald Trump in Fulton County, Georgia was decided by Judge McAfee, that she was indeed allowed to stay on the case and prosecute it. The issue was then appealed to the Georgia Court of Appeals, and the Georgia Appeals Court has stayed the rest of the case until they can resolve the issue. So what that means is that now, the Fulton County prosecution of Donald Trump is essentially frozen until the Georgia Appeals Court is able to hear the case and rule on it. What's worse, while arguments are slated to begin in early October of this year, we're not expected to see a decision handed down in that case until the spring of 2025. And then, as if that wasn't enough delay, whichever side loses is going to inevitably appeal to the Georgia Supreme Court, meaning we'll see even more delay on top of that. By the time the state's highest court finally hands down its ruling on whether or not Fani Willis can prosecute this case, it may be the year 2026. All of which is to say, for right now, you can take Fulton County, Georgia off of your list of cases that we should expect to go to trial before the November election. According to Trump's attorney, the Georgia Court of Appeals has properly stayed all proceedings against President Trump in the trial court pending its decision on our interlocutory appeal, which argues the case should be dismissed and Fulton County DA Willis should be disqualified for her misconduct. Now, first of all, Fani Willis won't be disqualified. This issue was already litigated in trial court. Fani Willis's relationship with her own co-worker, Nathan Wade, had zero impact on Donald Trump's prosecution. And by the way, Trump's team knows that, but because they traffic in deceit, they'll play the faux outrage game and pretend that this is some disqualifying issue. Again, it's not. It's already been adjudicated, but because they think that their audience is stupid, they'll continue to beat this drum anyway. But more importantly, the real reason they're happy about this is that it gives the Trump team the delay that they were so desperately seeking. They don't care what the issue is. So long as they can exploit it for some delay, they're happy to jump on board. Again, it's not like this issue is actually a valid one, but they don't care because it's an issue, and at the end of the day, that's all they're looking for. Now, there does exist one final avenue where this case could go to trial, although this option wouldn't include going to trial with Donald Trump. Now, not every defendant in this case is part of this appeal regarding Fani Willis, so logic would suggest that she could still go to trial with the remaining co-defendants for whom this appeal doesn't concern them. I presented this prospect to my Legal Breakdown co-host Glenn Kirshner, and here's what he had to say. Glenn, this issue with Fani Willis was only litigated by 6 defendants. It was Trump, Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Kathy Latham, Michael Roman, and David Schaefer, who's the chairman of the Georgia Republican Party. The remaining co-defendants haven't signed on to this effort to try to disqualify Fani Willis. So could those other remaining co-defendants be prosecuted by Fani Willis in the meantime?
Brian, this is my favorite question of this Legal Breakdown episode, because the defense attorneys who chose not to join the litigation to try to disqualify Fani Willis, well, guess what? They don't benefit from the judge's ruling. So in theory, Fani Willis can say, listen, this was a big unwieldy case from jump, and I was going to have to do a series of RICO trials anyway. I was going to have to take 4, 5, 6 defendants at a time, take them to trial, and then move on to the next batch of RICO defendants. I have done exactly that in large RICO cases that I prosecuted in the courts of D.C. So in theory, she could say, okay, the defendants who did not join this motion, they are not part of this appeal or of this litigation. Let's set a trial date for August 1st or September 1st, because they should not be able to avail themselves of the rights of the other defendants on appeal. That is a theoretical possibility. Now, I think what would happen is they would scream bloody murder, because they would say, wait a minute, the appeals court might be on the verge of disqualifying her, so we are asking for a stay in our proceedings as well, even though, frankly, we don't deserve it because we didn't join the underlying litigation. So I think there is some chance that she could at least propose that the defendants who weren't a party to this litigation should be made to go to trial, but it's an open question as to how that would play out.
Now, I should also note, there is one defendant, John Eastman, who requested a speedy trial, and Eastman is not a party to the appeal, meaning there is a world in which Fani Willis could move forward with John Eastman and others as part of a smaller block of defendants, which was likely going to be the case anyway, considering you can't prosecute 19 people all in one trial. With that said, the pitfall of such a move would be that the prosecutors would basically show their hand to the Trump team in terms of what they could expect when Trump eventually does sit at the defense table, and they would allow him to prepare accordingly. But frankly, at this point, considering Trump wouldn't be sitting at the defense table until 2026 anyway, it's probably better for the prosecutors to seek to at least hold someone, anyone, accountable while they have the opportunity to do so. As for Trump, there does exist the real possibility that if he wins in November, if Georgia prosecutors do try to prosecute him while he's president, that he'll figure out a way to get the case thrown out, likely by way of some perverse interpretation of the Supremacy Clause. Now, would the Supremacy Clause actually allow a federal official to get away with state crimes? Absolutely not. But are there judges willing to manipulate the laws in deference to their political party's leader? Ask Judge Cannon. Ask Samuel Alito. Ask Clarence Thomas. The right-wing judiciary has already broadcast just how willing they are to give their former Republican president exactly what he's looking for, no matter how absurd it is, no matter how little basis it has in law or fact or even common sense. I mean, hell, Judge Cannon basically agreed with Trump's interpretation of the Presidential Records Act in the classified documents case, even though the Presidential Records Act was quite literally put in place to prevent presidents from taking federal documents as their own. These people do not care about reality, they only care about expressing their slavish devotion to the God King. To that point, I asked Glenn if it would be possible then to delay the trial even further in the event that Trump wins so that he wouldn't be able to use his office to eliminate the case. And here's what he had to say. Is there a possibility then that Fani Willis could continue to delay this trial if, in the event that Donald Trump does get elected, she could delay the trial so that it doesn't even come to a head until 4 years down the line?
Yeah, there's actually a school of thought out there in academic circles that a sitting president can't be prosecuted by a state prosecutorial authority while in office. And if that were so, there would be no prohibition against prosecuting him for state charges after he leaves office. So, here we go again, kind of in that same endless holding pattern while Donald Trump is in office and then, I guess, unlawfully attempts to retain the power of the presidency, even if he loses the next election.
Right, because you have to believe that if he tried so hard to remain president before he had, all of these indictments and everything looming over him, imagine how hard he'll try to retain the presidency with pending litigation in D.C., in Florida, and in Georgia. I mean, if we thought it was bad before, this puts on full display the extent to which he will, avail himself of the levers of power in Washington to make sure that he never leaves office. So look, it's all well and good to do these thought experiments and try to plan for the future, but the sad truth is that the judiciary as a whole is woefully unprepared and incapable of dealing with a threat to democracy like Donald Trump. The fact that he's able to avoid prosecution through the election is a miscarriage of justice, and it's made possible by judges who, be it through lack of urgency or worse, partisan allegiance to the defendant, simply do not seem interested in the concept of swift accountability. And that has not only allowed Trump to effectively get away with it in a number of these cases, albeit not in New York, but it's emboldened him even more, knowing that our justice system largely isn't up for the task. All of which underscores the most important point. The courts are not going to save us. Prosecutors and lawyers and politicians are not going to save us. It is our responsibility and ours alone to show up in November and ensure that Trump never again sets foot in the Oval Office. If we want to see the remaining cases go to trial, that is the one way to do it. These cases will disappear if Trump becomes president, as unfortunate as that would be. So if we want justice, it is in no one's hands but our own. So let's make sure that we play our part and ensure that he finally answers for his crimes, and that his delay tactics aren't responsible for what would be one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in U.S. history. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by visiting briantylercohen.com/book. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my page. I don't ask for money, but if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, visit briantylercohen.com/book, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless.